year at the club, and we are starting off with a bang. We're tackling a topic tonight that is ubiquitous, fundamental to our well-being, and on top of our country's political and social agenda. Our domestic healthcare sector produces over $3.5 trillion annually and will soon account for 1/5 of our entire domestic economy. Today, the United States spends far more than every other country on healthcare per capita, and by some accounts, the quality and outcomes may not be perfect. We've seen dramatic increases in obesity, with nearly half of Americans overweight, including about 1/3 of our citizens under 20. We also have an opioid crisis that takes tens of thousands of lives every year. We have a society that's plagued by stress and loneliness, affecting not only mental health, but physical health and well-being. And today, there is more and more pressure on leaders of large corporations to deliver results for shareholders and also meet the needs of a broader constituency of stakeholders. And all of these issues are front and center in the healthcare industry today. And just as the costs of healthcare keep rising, the political debate has become louder. All of you know that one side wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act passed by the last administration, and the other wants to go all in with universal health care run by the government. We seem to have conflated politics and policy when it comes to health care in the US. For those of us who crave fact-based solutions, common sense, it feels increasingly lonely in the middle. So our guest speaker is here to fill the void. He'll show how leaders in healthcare are navigating our contentious economic, political, and social environment to improve health outcomes for literally millions of individuals and families, while also seeking to reduce costs and make our system sustainable. David Cordani is the CEO of Cigna, one of the top health service companies globally. He's been the CEO for over a decade and with the company for nearly 30 years. Cigna's roots actually go back almost as far as our country itself. Today, Cigna has 74,000 employees in 30 countries, and most importantly to David, it serves 165 million customer relationships around the globe. Under David's leadership, starting in 2009, Cigna drove compound annual growth rates of 11% for revenues and 15% for earnings per share, delivering 441% of total shareholder return along the way. And with Cigna's recent acquisitions of Express Scripts, which closed at the end of 2018, Cigna expects to generate adjusted revenues of $136 billion for 2019, up from $48 billion in 2018, with EPS growth approaching 17%. Now, in addition to delivering impressive results for shareholders, David knows that his role extends well beyond Cigna's P&L. He has spearheaded Cigna's Body and Mind campaign to promote wellness and show the important connections between emotional and physical health. He's used spokespersons like Queen Latifah, Ted Danson, and Nick Jonas to get the message across. And David recently joined with 180 top CEOs to co-sign a Business Roundtable letter committing to look beyond shareholders, hold themselves to a broader standard of success, and push for an economy that serves all Americans. To that end, Cigna has been recognized as a leader in corporate responsibility, being named to Corporate Responsibility Magazine's 100 Best Corporate Citizens, now for the 5th year in a row. He's also personally active outside of Cigna in Achilles International, a very interesting organization that encourages and enables people with disabilities to participate in athletics. He personally serves and coaches veterans as they run marathons, and that is truly inspirational. David recently co-authored the book that we've handed out today, The Courage to Go Forward, which is subtitled The Power of Micro-Communities. This book celebrates the role of small communities, named micro-communities, to help individuals achieve goals that they did not even think possible. And speaking of goals, David is also an incredible competitor in triathlons, having completed over 125 races to date, and more to follow. So before we welcome David to the stage, please draw your attention to the screens where we'll show you a brief Cigna video.
Being healthy, getting healthy, staying healthy, whole person healthy. It's more important than ever. The cost of care continues to rise, and it can be tough to navigate the system to find the best and most affordable care. Technology provides more options, but it still feels too complex. It's time for change. Change that will help everyone take care of their whole body, from head to toe and heart to head. It's why Cigna looked at what's possible and made insulin more affordable. And why we took on some of the world's most expensive treatments to cure rare diseases like childhood blindness or spinal muscular atrophy. We know that physical and mental health are inextricably linked. We have the nurses, coaches, and services to care for the whole person. We understand that worries can crop up in the wee hours. That's why we are here for you. 24/7, via phone, email, chat, text, and our powerful One Guide service. It's pretty simple, really. Taking care of every person, one person at a time. That's the whole reason Cigna exists. And that's what Cigna does. With innovation that's easy, affordability that counts, connectivity that helps, and accessibility that serves everyone. Everyone deserves good health, whole person health, from head to toe and heart to head.
So please join me in giving a warm Chicago welcome to our guest speaker, David Cordani.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. What a wonderful evening so far. And with the early part of the tee up with all the activities that are taking place, my blood pressure went up. So I'll look forward to trying to live up to the expectations of solving healthcare in 15 minutes or less. I have looked forward to this opportunity because this topic is something that is near and dear to all of our hearts, whether it's your business, your community, your personal health, your family, your loved ones, or otherwise. And I also know that Debra was a prior speaker for this esteemed group, so I know the bar is set high. So Debra, I'm going to work hard to try to elevate my game and live up to the expectations. As we saw in the video briefly, living a healthy, productive life is all of our wishes for ourselves, as I indicated, our family members and our community. Yet today, how we achieve that goal or objective is really one of the great debates of our times. And if you step back and think about it, the United States finds itself yet again at an inflection point to try to capture the ingenuity and innovation that exists in our great country. We know some of the facts. Healthcare spending is growing at an unsustainable rate, 5.5% to 6% per year. The U.S. spends way more than all other OECD countries combined from that standpoint in terms of their rate of growth. Yet life expectancy rate in the United States is not growing at a commensurate level, only outpacing 8 of the 34 OECD countries. At our current trajectory, the U.S. healthcare system will consume about 20% of the U.S. GDP by 2026. This causes constraint on other economic development, job growth, investment in innovation, investment in distribution growth. So when you find yourself at a place like that, you have to pause and step back and say, how did we get here? Well, if we try to simplify the complex, We should simplify it down to understand there's really three things that could be done to improve health. First and foremost are addressing behavior and lifestyles. Second is addressing health challenges with a pharmaceutical intervention. And third is addressing a health challenge with a medical intervention. The United States historically has sought to address healthcare largely through the third chassis, a medical intervention. We actually lead the world from that standpoint, from innovation. And over the last couple decades, we've dramatically expanded the consumption of pharmaceutical interventions with positive outcomes. But if we're honest with ourselves, we spend very little of the $3.5 trillion previously referenced on truly investing to keep people healthy in the first place. As a result, the United States is undisputably the largest sick care delivery system in the world, where incentives reward those that are intervening once sickness has already occurred. It's the system that we've built. We should therefore not be surprised that unfortunately as a country, we're actually getting sicker every day. Costs associated with chronic disease, as an example, including heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, already expand beyond $1 trillion. And if we incorporate the cost of lost productivity and the like, they approach almost $4 trillion already. Come to this great state, diabetes. 1.3 million people in Illinois, or 13% of the adult population, have been diagnosed with diabetes. The startling fact, though, it's up 60% in the last 8 years alone. Even more concerning, 38% of the adult population in this state, or more than 3.5 million people, are in a pre-diabetic state. The good news is that is reversible. Diabetes is just one example of a larger point that sickness drives the healthcare cost. A second cost driver is waste in the system, fundamental waste or inefficiency or opportunities. Most surveys and research estimate that it's approximately 25% of the overall cost equation. So let's think about that in orders of magnitude of $750 billion to $1 trillion. Largely a result of inefficient practices, overdiagnosis, poor care coordination for the polychronic, unnecessary treatments, avoidable readmissions, and complications. Medicare alone, as an example, had more than $23 billion of just improper payments, fundamentally that fall into the waste category. Now, though, Americans more than ever are demanding more from the healthcare system. They want health. They want to address health, not just sickness. And they want a system that delivers that in an affordable fashion, in a personalized fashion, with some level of predictability and some ease of navigation that they've learned to believe from other systems are possible. So our system must pivot. Let's imagine a system, for example, where costs rise at no greater than a rate of consumer price index, similar to other costs that individuals incur. A system where healthcare professionals and delivery system partners are actually rewarded and paid for keeping people healthy and for services that are never consumed. Where healthcare experiences are personal and convenient as they are in other industries. Now the good news is that envisioned future already exists in our great country, but in pockets. They are pockets, or as I like to call them, bright spots. Bright spots where millions of people today are consuming much more coordinated active care management and lifestyle management programs. Largely those are delivered through Medicare Advantage and the employer-sponsored system. Our question as a society is, how do we make sure we learn from those bright spots to expand to all Americans? Because at Cigna, we believe all Americans deserve and should have access to high-quality, affordable health care services. We believe that a sustainable approach is delivered through partnerships through the public and private sector, partnerships that leverage micro-communities, which I'll comment on a little bit in a couple of moments in the future. The societal debate that we are embarking upon right now is referencing the fact that over the last 30 years, we've seen some bright spots, but the actual financing of care continues to be a dramatic strain for our society. You all will recognize chapters we've gone through of managed care, where certain bright spots existed, but the constraint of access to care and the administrative burden actually outweighed its benefit. To a more recent chapter where individuals more actively engaged and supported through their lifestyle, through their health care, through their chronic disease management, and where healthcare professional partners began to get rewarded based on the value and quality of the service they were delivering, not just for the volume of the services. Increasingly, that value-based care or aligned incentive program we think is mission critical. Today as a country, 90% of Americans have access to healthcare programs and services, either through employer-sponsored programs, Medicare, Medicaid, or other government-sponsored programs. Yet we still have somewhere in excess of 10, 11% of our population that doesn't have access to programs. It's in excess of 30 million people. 2/3 of that 30 million individuals have access to Medicaid or highly subsidized government-sponsored program, yet do not signed up or are not signed up. We need to step into that void and get those individuals signed up. Yet 1/3 or approximately 10 million Americans do not have an adequate solution today that they deem as affordable. And new innovations around employer-sponsored program and government-sponsored programs we think are important. As we work to further evolve our program and our solutions within the United States, we think that the current debate around government-run healthcare is an incomplete debate at most. Said otherwise, arguing over who finances an unaffordable sick care system is not sustainable, and it doesn't transform our healthcare system from a sick care system to a healthcare system. It just shifts the cost and the financing. Just as we in the United States are debating what to do with our healthcare, as we should, countries outside the United States are also engaging in that debate, because the world's health population is also trending in the wrong direction and affordability challenges are taking place, with staggering costs, long waiting lines, and rationing of care, and eroding health outcomes. As a global health service company, we are fortunate to see healthcare delivery systems around the world. Let me just provide a couple of quick examples. In the UK, the national healthcare system, which is a highly developed, high-quality healthcare delivery system, just celebrated its 70th anniversary. Today, nearly 250,000 of British patients wait more than 6 months for planned treatment. Today, almost 25% of cancer patients didn't start their treatments on time. Today, an analysis found that 30,000 patients died in hospitals while waiting for treatment. That was an increase of 57% since 2013. As a result, today, just in excess of 10% of the British population is turning to private solutions. In Germany, a country that spends about 11% of their GDP on healthcare, they're seeing their costs raise at such a rate, they just passed a statute that requires employers to pay 50% of the cost of the health insurance. The point is, systems around the world are changing, and outside the United States, as countries are looking for new answers, they're starting to explore public-private partnerships that deliver more value. Now, to be clear, we believe there is a very clear role for governments to play. We don't view that it's an either or, we view it's an and. And that brings us back to the public-private partnerships. Within those partnerships, we take and harness the power of the private system to drive innovation, personalization, and in the United States, to bring localized solutions that deliver what local markets need and demand and want from their cultural norms of healthcare. Yet, the government plays a very important role, both providing funding for those who need a critical safety net, as well as developing important standards around competition, around innovation, around data interoperability to enable that system to move forward. Let's take an example, Medicare Advantage. It's a powerful, positive example of public-private partnership. Many of you probably know that Medicare Advantage is funded and regulated through the federal government, just like Medicare is. Medicare Advantage plans operate under a risk-based or a performance-aligned incentive program. Therefore, they're responsible for highly coordinated care for the benefit of beneficiaries. Through innovation, they're able to offer richer benefits or more complete benefits. And without the siloed, complex dimension of traditional Medicare, patients are able to get a more simple service experience as well. As a result, nationally, in Medicare Advantage, costs are lower than traditional Medicare, with some plans offering actually a zero financial obligation for individuals, where in the case of traditional Medicare, beneficiaries pay premiums and have complex coinsurance and deductible plans that go along with it. Medicare Advantage plans also offer more choice that work in those local markets for the benefit of individuals, be they cost sharing, be they access to physicians, or benefit designs. Importantly, the vast majority of seniors in Medicare Advantage like their programs as measured by the Net Promoter Score. In addition, in terms of medical outcomes, annually the mortality rate within Medicare Advantage enrollees is far superior than that of traditional Medicare. The point is the innovation works, and growth has been significant in those programs as new adoptions around pharmaceutical programs take place as well. As we sit here today, about 22 million seniors get their services through Medicare Advantage. Again, a public-private partnership. That's more than a doubling from a decade ago. As my mother navigates her health care, I'm glad she has a Medicare Advantage plan. Unfortunately, it's not Cigna because Cigna is not active in our home state yet, but it will be soon. The point being is a choice and a highly coordinated program is far superior working with healthcare professionals. Now, while public-private partnerships create a lot of powerful outcomes, as I mentioned before, micro-communities are also an important area for us to look for bright spots, to engage individuals as part of the change. Micro-communities can be as small as 1 or 2 individuals, as noted in the book, or as large as an employer where a group comes together. We define micro-communities as a group that comes together with shared goals and shared objectives. And one of the most effective examples of that in the area of healthcare is indeed that of an employer, where an employer is aligned to wanting healthy, productive, present coworkers to run their business and engender a level of engagement and support from that standpoint. We see that every day with our client relationships, from small, medium to large clients, with increased productivity, lower costs, improved consumer engagement, and overall improved health. Today, approximately 60% of all Americans get their services through their employer from that standpoint. And employer micro-communities drive increased health engagement of individuals, which is mission critical as we deal with the chronic disease challenges we have. By leveraging their culture, their shared communication capabilities, their shared support environments, and a little bit of peer support and peer pressure to influence behaviors. And we believe they can continue to play a critical role as we go forward in the future. When taken together, public-private partnerships coupled with micro-communities, we believe need to and will drive the next round of transformation for the benefit of healthcare. So in that transformed state, we have an environment where healthcare professionals are connected with their patients anywhere, anytime, taking the benefit of what is technologically enabled. Where healthcare professionals are able to deliver services in the home through electronic leverage, as well as through home healthcare professionals on a coordinated basis, because information is coordinated, easy to access, and managed on behalf of the individual to coordinate their care anytime, any place, to deliver the convenience of what they need and want. As we go forward, we think challenging ourselves to get more value out of the spending in the healthcare equation is mission critical, and it's one of society's biggest challenges to make sure we're getting the benefit of that investment. Now, healthcare, as I mentioned in my opening, is deeply personal, one individual at a time, and the resilience of an individual needs to be tapped into in the community. Before I close, that takes us back here to Chicago. In Chicago, for example, the Bronzeville community, which many of you know is a high-risk community. The Chicago Tribune recently ran a fascinating article with some statistics demonstrating the massive discrepancy that exists in terms of life expectancy in some communities, where it's safe to say that your zip code is a higher impact on your health status than your genetic code. In fact, Chicago has the widest gap in the nation in life expectancy by counties, and unfortunately Bronzeville is on the wrong side of that. Through our Cigna Foundation and an approximately $500,000 grant coordinating within the community, we worked to step into community to work with trauma victims within Bronzeville. Additionally, our team showed up at the 4th Ward Festival earlier to do health screening and health coaching of the 4 critical indicators of blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, and body mass index that are the primary predictors for forward-looking health challenges. At the end of the day, it underscores another critical point. Effective solutions in healthcare in our great country have to be highly localized. They are not nationalized. The diversity of our community, diversity of our population, and the diversity of the delivery system need to be harnessed and view that that is not a challenge. It's actually fuel and an opportunity for us as we go forward. And at Cigna, we view that community leaders and business leaders like you all have the opportunity to further drive that level of change, whether it's in terms of elevating the level of engagement of your coworkers or elevating the level of engagement in your community around health as well as sickness. Looking to get the partnerships and the micro-communities active. So I want to help us stay on schedule. I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly here. In summary, we view that the current debate around healthcare that is politically charged is actually a good conversation. our society needs to have this conversation because your health is your most important asset, and our next generation's health is their most important asset to give them a chance to have a vibrant, full of vitality life on a go-forward basis. The U.S. healthcare system that largely focuses on sick care is unaffordable and unsustainable. We believe the best path forward is fueling the proven public-private partnerships that exist and working even harder to leverage the power of micro-communities, be it employers or literal communities, to drive further levels of engagement and health improvement. I'm betting our conversation this evening is going to take us further into some of these topics, so I look forward to the dialogue with Debra. And with that, I thank you for your time, and on behalf of my 74,000 colleagues around the world who wake up every day trying to make a difference in our customers' lives. As noted, we have the privilege of serving 165 million customer relationships around the world. I want to thank you for inviting me here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. If you thought I set the bar high, well, Bono was here. You may not know that. And Bono said, and I quote, where you live shouldn't determine if you live. And so is that an aspirational statement, or is that something that you believe can really be attained, where we can close those actuarial gaps between our citizens?
We do believe that. And I did know Bono was here. I chose not to reference him because I'd be even more intimidated. But I think it's the right pause moment because, again, all healthcare is personal and all healthcare is local. And if we try to solve in this country or any other country we serve around the world a national standard, we'll fail. We need to tap into the power of the local community. And we see bright spots, which are what we call them, bright spots where the system is working in communities around the world, from some of the most rural and challenged aspects of developing and emerging countries, whether it's on the African continent or otherwise, to some of the most cosmopolitan areas. But what doesn't work is a passive system that finances sickness. That does not work. And lastly, we know in the United States that there are 4 behaviors that explain approximately 80% of the costs in the commercial population: physical activity, smoking, drinking, and what you eat.
I'm 3 for 4 on the bad side.
So as in most cases, everything in moderation. And on the drinking side, the science says 1 to 2 drinks per day are okay.
Okay.
You can't save them all up for the weekend. The body chemistry doesn't like that. So back to your question, it is attainable. We need to step into it one locale at a time, though.
But how much of that is the responsibility of participants in the healthcare sector writ large, and your partners, providers, payers, and how much is really just individual accountability, individual circumstances, societal determinants, whatever you'd like to call them? How can we change those things?
So let's take a term that many people in here know, social determinants of health, whether we want to go Bronzeville or otherwise. We know that the data would show us that there are certain indicators that would suggest a massive health risk will take place. So up on the dais, you have blessings in a backpack, right? Their leadership is stepping up to a different challenge. They're stepping up, Brooke and team are stepping up to a different challenge because the data shows us that if children are hungry, they will not be healthy. They can't learn. They're going to have behavioral issues. You're going to have a massive amount of challenges. Well, food is being solved in many ways in the school. What happens after school's over? Blessing in a Backpack is feeding thousands of kids over the weekend. Right? That's an example of taking an orientation of not admiring the problem, acting. And individuals are stuffing backpacks, and what do you see? You see improvement in academic performance. You see improvement in overall health. You see improvement in presenteeism. So to me, it's an example. It's a concrete example. There are bright spots. They happen one at a time, and it's controlled by the community, by business leaders, in partnership with government leaders to be able to drive it on a go-forward basis. But we can't admire the problem and look for a national solution. We have to get quite localized in terms of being able to drive that. And that's where we've seen at Cigna some of the brightest spots, again, around the globe. It's localized, done with public-private partnerships, but localized.
And let's talk about that. You're a big believer in partnerships. And some people don't even know really that Medicare Advantage is a government program, as you said, but that the insurers are kind of the middleman helping to coordinate the care. And so you have partnerships with not-for-profits at Cigna. You have partnerships with the government. You have partnerships with technology and other, interesting pockets within healthcare. Can you walk us through a little bit how you go about each of those different vectors to deliver results and make people healthier?
Sure. So maybe in a nutshell, it starts with a deep belief. So our number one stated strategic imperative is we seek to be the undisputed partner of choice. So the words are big. Undisputed, that takes our breath away, partner of choice. Because the only way the mission of improving health, well-being, and peace of mind can be achieved is with others. So we start with that goal and objective, and I'll give you two different examples. So we invest in companies at various stages, usually in the earlier phase, that are driving disruptive innovation because we want to accelerate our innovation curve. And we know we can't do it all ourselves.
Right.
That's a dimension of partnering. But we're along the journey with those entities. We're not trying to take over the journey. On the flip side, we seek to partner with healthcare professionals, physician groups, integrated hospital systems, and the like. And since you said Medicare Advantage, although you used the word middleman, which made me cringe a little bit.
I'm sorry.
I'm joking. We actually have some physician groups that are so sophisticated, yet we actually built standalone bricks and mortar, so examining facilities where they go to 2 days a week to see the Cigna Medicare Advantage patients because the experience is totally different. The exam rooms are different. There's nutritional coaching and teaching people how to cook. It's a living room, not a waiting room. There are social services that are available from that standpoint. When an individual is done for their medical treatment, the coaching room is adjacent to that room, so they're walked into the coaching room so they can be coached relative to their pharmaceuticals or lifestyle management, et cetera. That's a partnership. We're aligned together. They're independent. We like the innovation that transpires around that, but we've agreed to do this together. Those are two concrete examples of what we challenge ourselves each and every day to be able to build more of those bright spots, but doing it together as opposed to, since we're a large company, trying to do it all ourselves. That's not sustainable. We don't believe that's sustainable, or we believe we could go faster and do it in a more sustainable way by partnering.
Got it. And so do you think we're making progress, or do you think the bright spots are net better than the anchors that are holding us back in healthcare?
So I'm an optimist. So just to clear that from a starting standpoint, I'd say yes. But it's pretty breathtaking. We can't continue on the same trajectory. Let's take a concrete example. A brief comment was made relative to obesity in the United States and childhood obesity. For the first time in our recent history, the rate and pace of childhood obesity actually peaked, plateaued, and came down a tad. I don't love the statistic of having a third, but when it was going like this, when we were dealing with early onset of coronary disease, explosive diabetes, et cetera, for young teens and preteens, we knew that was not sustainable. So you have to move up ahead of the system and see a bright spot like that. When I see some of what's happening with business leaders and faith leaders in certain parts of Chicago, I could look at bright spots and say, it's unacceptable, the problem statement, but you can see the bright spots moving forward. And lastly, all too often we think small employers can't accomplish certain things. We have programs where we have on-site health coaches and biometric screening being done for employers with 75 employees. You find the one at-risk mom and help her go full term. You find the one heart attack and help that heart attack not happen. You find the pre-diabetic and help the pre-diabetic never become diabetic. That matters. And the leverage effect of that is what we try to fuel. So that's what fuels us. Yes, we see bright spots, but arguing over who finances a sick care system, that's not a bright spot from my standpoint.
Exactly. So I love the optimism, and something's obviously going right when we look at your leadership at Cigna and look at the financial results that you've delivered. What has been the secret there to the success that you've had and that Cigna's had under your leadership?
So we're a team. I'm quite fortunate to be a part of the organization for almost 30 years and be CEO for about a decade here. It starts with our purpose. It may sound soft and fuzzy, but anywhere around the world, the mission and why we exist transcends our coworkers. We're not perfect, but we understand our purpose to change people's lives for the better, improve health, well-being, and peace of mind. So a higher order purpose. Second is interjecting an and proposition. Grow and profitable, efficient and innovative, responsible to the shareholders and our community, deeply invested in our coworkers, et cetera. So we rolled out a caregivers program. We rolled out a sabbatical program for our coworkers to do more volunteerism from that standpoint. And that recipe has worked well. And then working to identify clients, employers, or partners that are more like-minded to drive change, that's worked well. Because we want to have long-standing client relationships where we invest together to try to change the lives of their coworkers. And therefore, our revenue growth has been double-digit over a decade. Our earnings growth has been double-digit over a decade. From that standpoint, we've delivered the lowest or slowest growth of medical cost trend in the industry with high clinical quality. That alignment recipe has worked well, but we're all impatient. We know we need to do more, bigger, better, faster tomorrow.
So given that as a healthcare company and a healthcare leader, you're used to these partnerships, you're used to the collaboration, trying to create alignment, did the Business Roundtable statement that you signed on to obviously serve the shareholder but look beyond the shareholder to other stakeholders, did that seem more natural to you than it may have for some of the other companies, the other industries, the other leaders? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The simple answer is yes. It was more aligned. Our one-page balanced scorecard as a corporation that's been in place for about a decade, measures move on it, looks, feels, smells like that pledge. So the upper left-hand quadrant talks about customers, coworkers, partner measures. The bottom left-hand quadrant talks about strategic and compliance measures. The center talks about additional community measures and customer measures. The upper right-hand quadrant talks about growth, which is retention first, retain, earn the right to expand. And then the bottom right-hand corner has some earnings outcome indicators. So we've always had a view that we need to be in balance. We're not perfect, but that balanced orientation and the multi-stakeholder, which we've always talked about, at least 7, 8 different stakeholder groups we want to measure all the time, that was always a part of the organization. So it was a natural evolution for us.
So as a for-profit corporation, you did not find the statement to be radical, rather more consistent with the way that you've historically run the company.
Correct. We've been trying to prove the thesis that you could be a mission-based company that is performance-based on scale and publicly traded. At the end of the day, the balanced scorecard or the sense of purpose or signing on to that, that's ultimately what we're trying to work on each and every day to keep that somewhat aligned. Because again, we're entrusted to be a big part of people's lives, sometimes when they're at the most vulnerable. So having those coexist is really important.
And what kinds of things have occurred during your 10-year time horizon that have been extreme challenges for the company or for you? I can think of a couple, but I'd love to hear what hasn't gone well and how you've bested those challenges.
So like I said, I'm an optimist, but I'll go on the other side of it. So early on in our tenure, we had I'll just rattle off a couple and you can tell me what you want to speak about. We had a large piece of business that was in runoff that was a massive economic complexity that took the company close to its knees financially and was deemed to be non-solvable by the capital markets, and we had to figure out a way to solve it. Then we had the ACA reformatting the marketplace in totality, and we were on the public record that we didn't stand for repealing the ACA. We thought we needed to move forward societally. We had a large, high-profile combination that didn't take place. The government blocked it, and after litigating it, it was blocked, and then it was litigated further. And then we completed another large-scale combination of the very recent vintage about 11 months ago that was successful. And meanwhile, we've been growing our global footprint significantly with acquisitions and joint ventures and the like. So a lot of twists and turns along the journey.
So how did you keep your eyes on the growth and the customer and the health and well-being of your healthcare clients while you were going through some fairly existential crises.
Yeah, existential is a good way of thinking about it. As I reflect back into your question, we spend a lot of time in our company trying to communicate simply and transparently, et cetera. So as best we can, everybody knows what's going on. Secondly, it's a team sport, so everybody has different roles to play. Yeah. So when some of these challenges or threats are transpiring, we step up to them, but we say a small group of individuals is going to be working on this, 0.5% of the overall organization. The other 99.5% got to stay focused on our customers, our clients, our partners, our communities on a go-forward basis, because that's the pledge we've made, and we'll keep the lines of communication wide open. So if I was to oversimplify it, it's alignment, it's trust, it's heavy communication and clarity, and then a relentless results orientation in terms of driving through that. And that recipe has worked well for us, whether it's on the massive challenges, moderate challenges, or the huge opportunities, making sure we stay focused on the mission, and then the team breaks down in terms of their parts of the mission, but we're all codependent on one another, even at the scale we operate on.
And some people challenged, after the Anthem merger was blocked, horizontal integration, then you went to the Express Scripts merger, which is more of a vertical integration in healthcare, and that even was challenged by activists, but you fought your way through that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we had...
you were confident.
We had a high-profile activist that came in. They tend to happen in the summer months, some of the biggest challenges, so they're quite memorable for our team. And you just get back to the facts. So on a challenge like that, you come back to the facts in terms of what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it's to the benefit of your customers, clients, and partners, and as a result will be beneficial to your shareholders. So it tests your conviction, make no doubt about it. When you have a challenge like this, it's not for the faint of heart. It tests your conviction, but our organization being convicted in a positive way around what we're trying to accomplish helps that, because even that disruption was highly manageable, and we chose to lean into it aggressively, and not fight. You don't want to fight, but you'll take it on fact base and try to demonstrate with facts how your customers, clients, and partners in society will benefit, and as a result, how your shareholders will benefit. And when I say it, it sounds easy, and the basic playbook is, it's hard because it's emotionally charged, it's time pressured, it strains the team, but it tests your conviction, the character of your team, and your commitment to the purpose of what you're driving forward to. And I think our company, in an odd way, is better off for going through some of those challenges. You don't wish them, but when you go through them, you develop new muscle, new skills, new abilities, and even more deeply galvanize on that purpose and what you're trying to build.
And how did you get to go so global? Is that a more recent phenomenon? And what have you learned from that? Where are some of the exciting business opportunities that you see in the 30 countries where Cigna is doing business?
Sure. Just one micro data point. So Cigna was a result of a merger of two companies, INA and Connecticut General, back in the 80s. INA was founded in 1792. Connecticut General was founded in 1865, so long history. Mm-hmm. INA always had a long global history. The first rider of a trans-Pacific cargo going from the United States to China, so long history. My predecessor actually enabled me and our organization to have some seeds that were planted around the world, and some businesses that were planted around the world that were interesting, and when we did our strategy, we decided to feed and fuel some of those significantly. We're the largest rider of expatriate benefits around the world for corporations, for IGOs like the World Health Organization, the World Bank, the United Nations, et cetera, and then NGOs, aid workers and mission workers from that standpoint. And then we're deep in countries where we believe we could design solutions that work that, again, interestingly, are highly localized, uber localized and personalized, brought to individuals in emerging and developing markets. So we've grown about 2.5 times outside the US organically, our organic growth rate over the last decade.
Yet you still think the United States is one of the more exciting business opportunities for growth?
Yes, no doubt about it. First and foremost, God forbid you have a health challenge, here's where you want to be. Yep. There's no doubt about it from that standpoint. So with my comments that I made, prepared comments are around the challenge to the future, but the U.S. healthcare delivery system is the most sophisticated healthcare delivery system on scale in the world from my point of view. There are other bright spots around the world. Secondly, the scale challenge of doing it for 330 million plus diverse individuals
Yes.
In terms of evolving that from that standpoint. Highly, highly exciting.
It is.
And fundamentally necessary for financial vibrancy of our country for decades to come.
Yes.
So there's a opportunity set, there's a social mandate, there's a national mandate if you want to look at it. Health challenges are even today in the United States a national security issue because it's projected that there won't be enough kids that are fit enough to serve. So it fits under any one of the sequences from that standpoint.
Well, and do you think it's a competitive advantage for you in the United States that you are in these other markets and you really get to see what's working? Maybe you can tell us about some of the interesting successes, if you want to call them bright spots. Are there any that you can import to our domestic market?
Yes, so I'll try to give a concrete example. So outside the United States, beyond the expatriate benefits, the globally mobile population, we sell direct to individuals in multiple countries, supplemental solutions that fill the gaps for the social programs. That process is a direct to individual sold program, telemarketing, internet, digital, direct response TV campaigns, et cetera, very different than what we do in the United States. Therefore, it's all data driven.
Yes.
So next best action, data modeling, data driven, what we would know today is AI oriented
Yes.
and machine learning oriented. Heavily, heavily, heavily dependent upon that. So we took that next best action orientation to the United States and built that in our clinical services program. So when our nurses, our health coaches, our behavioral health professionals, or our service professionals are working with customers, there's AI algorithms that are firing to try to determine what is the next best action at that moment of truth for that individual. Because we need to shift from when it's convenient for us or for a medical professional to talk to an individual and meet that person where they are. So the idea for that came from a direct individual orientation of using information, but we took it and applied it totally different in the United States of a direct to consumer coaching and engagement program. And that was birthed outside the United States for a different purpose, but as many cases, innovation seeds come from somewhere else, but they're applied in a different way.
Got it.
We've taken US employer-sponsored wellness programs and health engagement programs for the chronic outside the United States because we have many employers who are having massive productivity challenges because of low back pain, chronic disease such as diabetes or coronary disease, that the social program is paying for the sick care, but they need us to come in and design programs with them around their well-being, if you will, to get the productivity. We brought that from the United States, the ideas, but then you have to apply it culturally specific locally.
That's amazing. And one of the things you said is that if you really are sick, you want to be in the United States because we do have the most sophisticated, best healthcare in the world. However, you've also said we have a healthcare affordability crisis. And we know that some of the treatments that we have in the United States, and you touched on them in your video, are some of these incredible, mind-blowing genetic therapies that are being developed almost by the day, some of which may cost between $1 million and $2 million for a single individual.
Right.
How do you see the desire for a sustainable system where we're not even providing basic health care to so many, with our demographic challenges, the aging of the population, and then layering on these incredible cures really for individuals who are blind or maybe would die at the age of 2? And how do you see it all becoming a sustainable system for wellness?
I don't have a silver bullet there. So I'll comment in 2 areas. One, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, we need to get a higher return for the amount we're spending today from our society, right? Whether you take the 25% waste that most independent studies reference, think about it. $750 billion to almost $1 trillion of redeployable spend that is possible. That is not waste because people have malice or are doing something wrong. It's that the information shows us that things could be done better, right? Our system is working for what we've asked it to do today. Come around to the other side in terms of innovations that are actually truly curative, as you pointed out. So take a $2 million intervention for childhood spinal issues. Absent that medication, the child would not live.
Right.
Period. The muscular system would not develop under a diagnosis. The child would not live. Now with that $2 million drug, the child could live. Who pays for it? How is it funded? That's a societal challenge. So we've tried to step into that breach. We founded an organization called Embark. It's a not-for-profit. It's taken initially two high-cost gene therapies, working with the pharmaceutical manufacturers on unique contracts. Any entity could contract with Embark to consume the services out of that. A singular best-in-class clinical program management as agreed to by the clinical community and the pharmaceutical manufacturer, a value-based or outcome reward for the pharmaceutical manufacturer, and then for employers, municipalities, et cetera, if they want to spread the cost out, there's a way actually to create a better predictability over the cost profile, not to finance it over 3 years, but actually to say, if you want to finance your total population and pay $1 per person per month, and then if you need that service, it will be covered. We're using that vehicle as a way of reimagining what the services should be. So open architected, not-for-profit, value-based care contract, singular clinical protocols as agreed to by the clinical community, and then entities like Cigna could contract with and consume the services out, because we think society is better off for the small amount of events that are going to happen. But whether you're a 100-life employer or a 1,000-life employer, you can't handle many $2 million surprises.
Right.
And we don't need 50-life employers getting a $2 million surprise, because it will bankrupt them. And that's a societal failing. So that's a way in which we're trying to step in and try to solve the problem as opposed to just observe it.
Well, there will be more of these genetic therapies coming along. So
Correct.
the problem, I mean, it's a double-edged sword though, because it's a
Yes.
wonderful outcome, but the financing of it is obviously a big challenge.
No doubt.
So one of the things that we've talked about a little bit, and is this idea of you doing these 125 triathlons. And there has to be something inside you that is driving you to compete. So can you talk about why you started, why you continue, and how does it compare to doing marathons and helping the disabled athletes, which you also do?
Yeah. So when it comes up, even my colleagues, most folks don't ask how it started. So since you asked how it started, I tore this knee up in college playing basketball recreationally, and I was told I couldn't run anymore. And I watched the Ironman, the Hawaiian Ironman on TV, and I had this kind of sappy moment by myself watching it, and I said to myself, I'm going to do that someday.
The Ironman.
Yep. No right, no ability to do it, never swam competitively, et cetera. And the next year I did my first sprint triathlon, and I kind of like that. And then I did an Olympic triathlon and then a half Ironman. My first half Ironman was not a good experience. And then I was able to build up to it. So in a nutshell, what I found...
Are you counting the half and the 125? Are you cheating?
Yes, I am. They're all triathlons.
You heard it here first, everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll give it to you.
It doesn't say 125 Ironmans. You actually can't find somebody who did 125 full Ironmans with their body still being intact. So for me, it became a way of life. So and from a business standpoint, it's similar. You have a goal, you set a strategy, you put a plan together, you execute the plan, you go on the race course, there's always a negative surprise. Something always happens on the race course unexpectedly, and how you overcome that relative to the goals that you had in front of yourself. And I found myself keep going back and testing it from that standpoint. And it became a way of, like I said, life, stress management, health, resiliency, energy level. And for the last 9 years or so, I've been able to channel that into the blessing of guiding amputees through half marathons and marathons, which is a same challenge, different environment, but you're doing it for somebody else. So I actually feel more pressure in an odd way.
Talk about that.
You can't fail the person.
Right.
I can't have a bad day. You can't stop when they don't want to stop. There are things that just can't happen, period. You're going to get them to the finish line safely in one way, shape, or form. And so in an odd way, I feel more pressure because when you do a race on your own, you're on your own. You're self-accountable. But now you're in service to somebody else. But it's the same recipe. It's the same recipe of the approach, the discipline, et cetera. And then the satisfaction on the back end of doing it and supporting somebody and seeing the multiplier effect for them. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
When you've helped and guided others through a marathon that maybe they never thought they could accomplish, what what first of all inspires them to even try to do it? And what has been sort of the more difficult experiences that you've had trying to get someone through a 26.2 mile race?
Yes, so my time has been spent with largely veterans with recently dealing with their injuries, and all double amputees, 2 single amputees. And in a lot of cases, they're questioning kind of worth and purpose.
Yes.
And kind of starting over from scratch. So you get in their head pretty deeply in terms of, are they setting the goal because it's something that they want to accomplish? So you spend a lot more time on the physical side and the mental side in terms of why. Why is this important to you? Mm-hmm. And then once you feel like they own the goal, then you go at it with them. In the book, and I just say this lightly, there's a story about Cedric King, Master Sergeant, Army Ranger. And Cedric and I had literally a physical throwdown on the Boston Marathon course where 2 police officers came up because Cedric was on the ground, I had his prosthetics off, and he wouldn't let me put his prosthetics back on. He had tapped out, he was done. And we were exchanging language in a pretty flowery way. Army Rangers speak differently. And Cedric wouldn't let me put his prosthetics back on. I cleaned off his stumps, I patched the hot spots, etc. Had some different parts in the backpack that had to go on, and he wouldn't let me do it. And when I sat on him to put him on, he started punching me. And we had more words exchanged. And I won't tell you how I got into his head, but I knew him enough to know there were certain buttons to push, and I pushed some buttons with him. And he got so mad that he kind of channeled. He goes, I'm going to kick your blank and did it. I said, do it at the finish line. I said, channel it into the race. And during the whole race, he said, I'm going to kick your ass at the finish line. And when we finished, he went right into a wheelchair and he pulled me down to me and goes, I got work to do with you. We got some unfinished business. I said, really? Now, buddy? So my point is, it's deeply personal, like any other challenge that someone has to overcome. And in that case, me knowing Cedric at some level that was a little bit more personal, where he let me in, I was able to push his buttons, but literally 2 cops were trying to pull me off of him initially because it looked like I was doing something inappropriate to a double amputee, and I was just trying to help. And Cedric got to the finish line about on his time goal, and was miserable conditions and otherwise, and he now is a full-time motivational speaker. He wants to do a full Ironman. He's got through a half Ironman. He and I are running together again next Sunday, or the Sunday coming up. So you kind of see the power of those possibilities.
And what is this deep desire? I mean, you trained as an accountant, and I see the real mission and
That sounds
passion.
exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Army Ranger Marathon overcomes it. You're an accountant.
But you have this desire to serve and help that comes through in the passion that you have for Cigna and the customers. So where did this come from? Where in your life what made you have such drive and passion to help others?
Yeah. So at some level, the more you engage, the more it kind of leverages itself and feeds on itself. I think anything is possible. And then you touch what you think is impossible, and then you find something magical that happens. The first soldier I saw, accomplish this, it was unbelievable and unspeakable from my standpoint. For me personally, I'll attach it back to my upbringing. I was raised in a simple blue-collar family with my grandparents and parents, and my grandparents were immigrants, and my grandmother instilled in the 3 boys, I'm the middle boy, the golden rule. So the basics of the golden rule and the responsibility you have to help others. And I didn't understand it when I was a kid. Like, there was little things we did, but I think you have a responsibility if you're able to help others. I get great fulfillment and satisfaction out of it. I call it the give to get. I think actually the giver gets more than the receiver, from my point of view. Most people think it's the other way around. I actually think it's the opposite, and it just leverages itself in a very healthy way.
Yes.
But I attribute it back to my grandmother.
So being in the healthcare sector is really the right calling for you. And what do you want to get accomplished now at Cigna? What do you see and you're now the chair of the American Health Insurance Plans, which obviously there's a lot on your plate. So what are the driving things? You've accomplished so much. What do you want to see the U.S. have happen in the U.S. healthcare system, have happen at Cigna? Help us understand the future.
Yes, so from my point of view, we have the opportunity, starting from the U.S. and working our way out, and the U.S. is never going to have all the answers, right? We need to continue to learn and whatnot. But the U.S., we need to flip it on its head, and actually we should desire to have the healthiest, most vibrant, highest vitality society in the world. We already have the most innovative society. We have an unbelievably diverse society. We have something that is admirable in terms of from an experimentation standpoint, in terms of the economy. We need to flip the energy on its head and desire to have the healthiest, most vibrant, high vitality society. And as a company at Cigna, we challenge ourselves to be a force of good relative to that. As we like to say, our mission is to improve health, well-being, and peace of mind of those we serve. We want to change our customers' lives for the better. So at Cigna, that's what drives us. What drives us is changing this conversation from sick to health, going from the introduction of the whole person, mind, body health, introducing the concept of the fact that, ladies and gentlemen, we have a loneliness epidemic in our country. We feel that the largest study of its kind with UCLA, and not only does it show us that almost 50% of Americans are lonely, what blew me away is it's our youth that are the most lonely. That should take all of our breath away. So to me, it's a call to actually shift gears and say, we have to work to get our society healthier, mind and body, and then that actually is a driving force to creating a healthy economy, a vibrant economy, a vibrant society. And at Cigna, we're trying to do our part both in terms of nationally, locally, within our communities, et cetera. And I feel I'm fortunate to be the leader of the company right now to drive chapters of that change.
And that's an incredible aspirational goal. If you could set up a framework of the healthcare system in the United States that would enable that goal, could you simply describe what that might look like?
I do three things. One, every individual would have some level of incentive and disincentive tied to their lifestyles and behaviors. And only those who didn't have control over those lifestyles and behaviors would be pulled away from that. Two, 100% of every dollar spent in healthcare would be tied to some value-based outcome. Our U.S. healthcare system is the biggest break-fix, volume-based funding system in the world. It has to pay based upon the quality of the outcomes, so engage the individual and support them, reward the healthcare professionals and the delivery systems for the quality of what they deliver, not the volume of what they deliver, and then once and for all, harness data with lack of interoperability from interoperability to enable individuals to actually make those informed decisions and the doctors. Those are the three things. And if you only do one, it's lifestyles and behaviors, because it explains 80% of all the costs in America. And like I said, there's four. So as we think about when we go home to our families, how much time are we spending on physical activity? It's 4 to 5 days a week of 30 minutes of brisk walking that helps the heart, period. Smoking, it's yes, no. It's a yes, no. Drinking, it's in moderation. Food intake, it's in moderation. So it's within control from that standpoint. We've allowed it to be out of control. And we need to simplify it and bring it back and bring it in control.
Well, with those lessons to guide you to a healthier, more vital life, please join me in thanking our guest, David Cordani, for a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.